place where you're entitled to Brad's opinion. And now for your host, Brad Allard.
Hey, everybody. How y'all doing today? Today we have DeWayne Burns, our state representative, who is running in the runoff on May 28th. I believe early voting is May 20th, is it not?
That is correct.
That's right. And we need to get this man back because some of the forces that are opposed to him are not in your best interest, fellow listeners and my vast listening audience, and we'll talk all about that. Talk about particularly the school choice issues and some of the misleading advertisements which are inundating our airwaves. I've never seen, particularly for a local race, I've never seen this amount of advertising. And, you know, liberal DeWayne Burns and all this other stuff. I'm thinking, what universe is he liberal in? I mean,
I don't know.
do you not even recognize yourself? What I like also is the way they photograph you. You got this grainy black and white thing going on, and you got Beto O'Rourke on one side and Nancy Pelosi, whom I'm sure you converse with every day.
Never.
Yeah.
George Soros, don't forget that.
Oh yeah, George
got
Soros.
him in a lot of those.
But I've seen, Nancy Pelosi. What's she doing in these ads?
I don't know.
It is ludicrous. And so we'll talk all about that. And we'll talk about events you have coming up. And we're going to talk a lot about the school choice issue because I think a lot of people are being very much misled about it. I think they're being sold as some sort of a means of helping young, poor people get out of bad schools. And that's not what's going to happen. And so we're going to talk about that. But I want to run through the ads real quick so we can get to the heart of the matter here. Friend Otto says hello. I texted this morning to my sponsors, hey, I'm going to have DeWayne Burns on the show. And he says to say, hey, I'm sure you've been there more than once.
Had an event there this morning.
Is that
joke?
Is that right? Yeah.
Sure did.
How did it go?
It went well.
That's good.
Well,
So they didn't throw things at you. Liberal, unclean.
No, they did not.
No.
They didn't. It was good.
Yeah, and he's also opened that Gina's Pizza. Local politicians have been using that place as well. Now that our local races are over, I'm glad. I think they turned out pretty well, so there you go. Also, thank you to Wild Cigar and Culture. It's also a nice place to do these kind of events. They have a conference room I've been asked to push a little bit because it's got about, 12 to 15 seats. And so you have a small conference there and then go out and have a cigar and a drink if you like and that kind of thing. And have a patio out there and the weather's nice for that. Also, thank you to Tiffany and Nico over at Local Life. She got the new issue out, Women in Business. Local Life magazine comes out once a month. It's 30,000 homes. Also goes to a lot of different retailers. So if you're waiting or whatnot, you can look at that and just to ponder whatever they got going on. Also, Southern Jim, I tell you, you're going to have to take Mrs. Burns here after this is all over. That's one thing I've talked with a couple times with local races about how the spouses and families have to endure all this as well.
Yeah.
How's your wife holding up?
She has, I think, become a little numb to it. Mm-hmm. But a trip to Southern Jim might be appropriate at this point.
Yeah,
for sure.
It would be because
a good start for sure.
Well, there's never a solo effort. It's a family effort. I was talking to one of our council members, and he brought his daughters on the show. And this is about a year and a half ago, and they talk about it gets kind of intense. Sometimes the kids take it. Some of the abuse because adults like to pick on people, I guess, or whatever. Also, I'm sharing it with the various groups here so we can get multiple coverage. There we go. All right. Now, also, thank you to Two Maids. Maybe you ought to buy her a gift card to Two Maids to have them clean the house. You still live in Cleburne, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's in their area, twomaidscleaning.com/Burleson. Also, 817-764-8733. You get paid based on the quality of the job they do. So they're very motivated, and a lot of us in our networking group use it, and we buy gift cards for our spouses, or some of us use this service for our parents because we're getting to that point where they need a little extra help. And so there you go. So thank you, Brenda, for all you're doing. Also, Old Pro Roofing, a local business, been here quite some time. John Williams, 817-734-2756. The best time to get your roof checked is today when it's not raining. You don't want to find out while it's raining that you need a new roof. And he'll come out and he'll tell you all about it. He'll tell you if you need one. He'll tell you if you don't need one. So you don't have to worry about getting some sort of sales job. Also, Camco Mortgage with Candy and Sammy Campbell, 817-778-4592. Candy Gow, 817-925-2661. Mr. Burns has promised to lower interest rates across the nation if he's reelected. Well, not quite. Wrong race, huh?
Right. Yes, sir.
Do people all expect that kind of thing?
Oh yeah,
Like
they expect me to fix everything.
He said, "Oh, it rained on my parade, so it's your fault." I talked to a couple other politicians locally, and they get blamed for everything under the sun, literally. But anyway, back to Camco. I've done business with them a couple of times over the 20 years they've been in other posts, and now they have their own place. They'll do you right, and they're honest, good people. They really know how to handle the business. And lastly, Jeff Kelly over at the Weathington Agency sells real estate all throughout the 817 area. So sell 817-781-0546. Office 817-720-6300. Jeff at jeffkellyrealty.com will get you his email. There's lots going on in real estate. Even though you read things in the national papers about what's going on, about, problems with the real estate market and all this other business, it's still hot around here. And a lot of it has to do with what we talked about yesterday about the schools and the Opportunity Fund, which you're aware of, right? Now, Mr. Burns is cognizant, I guess, of that whole program, and that was a good show. Let's you want to talk about schools first, and then we talk about this goofy campaign against you?
You bet. However you want to do it.
All right.
Happy to share.
Well, here's the thing that's really bothered me about school choice, and I really did give it some thought. I wasn't, I thought, I'm not opposed to putting some sort of emphasis on the public schools to up their game, so to speak. All right. And nobody really is opposed to that. So I thought, I wonder if vouchers is a means of doing it. And I looked into it, and it was not. And I've taught both at a private school. I taught for 3 years after I left BHS. And what's interesting is nobody I knew over there, none of the staff or administration, were in favor of vouchers. You'd think they might be, but they weren't, because a lot of them came, like me, from public schools. A lot of them had their kids in a public school and that kind of thing. And the administration also didn't want to be seen as draining money away from their fellow citizens. So they were all opposed to it. And even most of the parents were not really that excited about vouchers. And that kind of surprised me. I really thought they'd be all over it,
Mm-hmm.
But they really weren't, because they understood the impact of it. And I've come down very much opposed to vouchers, because not only is it going to impact public education money, but it's a scam, in effect. It's going to people that already can afford private school. Isn't this how it's supposed to work?
Yeah.
Okay. You said it's $10,000. Is it per kid or per family?
Per kid.
Okay.
10,000. If you're eligible to be enrolled in a public school, then you would get $10,000.
Would it go to the parents or would it go to the school?
Well, it'd be administered through a third party. And that was part of the problem with the deal, but administered through a third party company, out-of-state company.
That's wonderful.
Owned by Betsy DeVos. And
Trump's former education secretary, right?
And it would, and then, that was, I think the price tag on that was somewhere between 3 and 5% of the whole total. We were at 40 million or whatever. And then it's just there's a lot of money to be made.
Oh yes, absolutely. So let's say I'm a family in Fort Worth, and I live in a lower middle income family. That $10,000 isn't going to do a lot of good, because here's the two things I think will happen. It's kind of reminiscent of what happened when Biden put that subsidy on electric cars. What did GM do? Raised its prices, right? What do you think is going to happen with these private schools? They're going to raise their tuition, because they know that their parents now have $10,000 extra per kid. And, and all these private schools, most of them anyway, operate on pretty thin budgets, they say. And they're always hitting people up for donations and whatever else. And so they'll raise up maybe $2,000 or $3,000. And so it really is a transfer of public money to the private schools, no matter what they say. If they say it's going to the family, the schools, they're not getting extra money. Yes, they are. That's going to happen. I know it is, because I was there to see it. Plus, the fact is, most of the private schools that most of these kids will be going to, if they're of any quality, going to be anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 a year. Would that $10,000 make a lot of difference? Not really.
No.
Because that's just tuition is just a start of it. Then you got fees, and then you got T-shirts you got to buy, and you got fundraisers, and you got to pay for the school trip, and then you got to do this, that, and the other. And anyway, I don't know who Mr. Land 67 is. That's fine. Could you ask Mr. Burns if he's still talking to private citizens with questions? Longtime Republicans confused by the campaign against him. Yes, we will be talking about that during this process. But tell me exactly how this voucher plan would affect public schools.
Well, simply put, the plan that was put on the table was bad for not only the schools but for taxpayers. It was bad for the state. It was bad for this district. And after the fact, now more and more people are coming out of the woodwork saying, "Man, this was a bad plan." Even voucher proponents, even school choice proponents, are saying, "I'm for school choice, but this particular plan was not good. There were parts of it that they wouldn't support." Even my opponent has said that now.
Really, she's spoken publicly about it. Has she?
Yeah.
I haven't heard it. That's another thing we're going to talk about.
But yeah, and the reason why I opposed the plan, there's several, but the main reasons were, number one, it was expensive. It was going to be expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
We've got the border is the primary issue on everyone's mind. It's the crisis of the day. It is the issue we've got to address, both federally and at the state. And number two is property taxes. And so we were, and the House passed 2 property tax cut bills. And then in the last session, we passed another and finally got it through with the Senate. Of course, as everyone knows, it had its largest property tax cut in Texas history, raised the exemption to $100,000 for the homestead, and then literally bought down taxes with the other money. And my opinion, it was a bait and switch for us to do that and then turn right around and create a brand new government program that was going to cost $1 billion in the first biennium, and then $2 billion the next year, $2.3 billion the next year, and then continue to grow from there per year, and saddle our taxpayers with another tax burden. I thought it would have been one of the most egregious expansions of government in history of Texas, and I just couldn't support that. The other part of it too, of course, was with it being universal. The governor wanted a universal plan, and which meant every kid that we educate, and that included illegal immigrants. And the plan was going to be based on means. It was to be handed out based on your means, based on income. Often our illegal immigrants are our poorest folks, and so they'd move right to the front of the line for either the homeschool voucher or the private school voucher.
And see, that's another thing. You mentioned the homeschool voucher. I don't think that gets much publicity, and I'm going to ask about that in a minute. But what really bothers me is that, a lot of the students I had at Southwest Christian were upper middle income. Not all of them. I mean, there's some that their grandparents are helping their parents pay for it and that kind of thing. And I think that's what they're trying to sell you at the Texas public. We're helping these kind of families get a private education. What's really going to happen is the folks at Mira Vista or, Overton Ridge or, Westover Hills, they're going to get the bulk of the benefit. All right. And that's this dollars to it. This idea that we're going to help some lower middle income kid get out of Dunbar High School and go to Country Day is ludicrous, because even if you paid half of it, that other half is expensive. And like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, there's all these other tack-ons. And to be frank, you're putting a lot of these kids in a situation where they're not going to be able to keep up with the Joneses, and it's hard, when you have that kind of situation where you're going to a school, everybody else is going to Switzerland for the summer or whatever else, and and you're going nowhere, and that kind of thing. Okay, Mr. Land, my name is Jody Land. We live in Burleson, touching Rocky Branson. If you're familiar with him, you may be. Rocky's new Chisholm Summit Development. Thank you for the local interviews. Sorry for interrupting. No, this is not interrupting, sir. This is what this show is about. You ask all the questions you want. I know that Chisholm Summit Development, that's going to be a real growth area in Burleson, but that's been a local issue is more than anything else. As far as would they be taking money from the private schools away from the public schools? They sell that at public funding won't be touched. Is that really the case?
So that's how it's sold, because the budget, the money was going to come out of the surplus originally, and surplus means extra. Well, we're not going to always have extra. We often don't have extra, more often than not. And so where does that come from? Well, I can tell you where it comes from. It comes from the public education budget. It comes from the public school fund. It comes from property taxes. And so to say it wasn't going to impact public education is is disingenuous. It wouldn't the first 2 years because there was a hold harmless provision, which basically meant if you have money follow a child to a private school, $10,000 to a private school, well, they were going to still fund that child according to the weighted average daily attendance amount at public school. So you're paying actually twice for that student, which is what another reason. And some people think that's great. Some people don't. I mean, that's expensive. That makes that bill a very expensive bill.
There's another thing that's another aspect of this whole thing is that it's the assumption that private schools are better than public schools. And as somebody I taught in both, I saw advantages in both. I mean, the advantage that private school had, at least at Southwest Christian, were smaller classes, a bit more contained environment, if you will. And some parents want that. And if they want that for their child, and also the Christian environment, if they want that, then fine, great.
Absolutely.
Pony up. But also, to be frank, BHS and BISD offer so much more than most of your private schools do. We were talking about yesterday with Beverly Powell, and I've talked about that I'll be talking about that on Thursday with a couple of members of BISD. I mean, the programs, early college program, the CTE and STEM classes, and the culinary arts, and the AP and dual enrollment. I mean, Southwest Christian was a good education, but it couldn't match the variety that we offered BISD students.
Sure.
And so this idea that just because it's private, it's better is not true. And another concern I have is that you're going to have private schools open up in the back of a garage or something like that and taking advantage of this funding. Is that a possibility?
Sure. At first, there were no strings attached originally, no accountability there. Although there were other ideas that were tossed out there that would have added some accountability to it and different things like that. But no accountability. So you're right. So you could open a private school and you'd be eligible for that. Same with the the homeschool provisions as well. And here's the deal. I agree with you. So like I support our local private schools. We have some great ones and they do great things. And the way it's described to me and the way I describe it is they do this. Like, I don't know, like they do a certain thing and that's what they do. And then if you want to be a part of that, join that. Because that's what they do. Whatever that is for them, that's what they do. And public school has to do everything, everything else that has to be done for special needs, for early English learners, all those kind of things. But the private schools they specialize in whatever they do, and they have a right to do that. And I want to protect that. And I know that down the road, because I was involved and heard the discussions that, okay, no strings attached now, no accountability now, but down the road there will be, because ultimately that is those are tax dollars, and there's not an organization, there's not a public entity that operates with other people's money that doesn't at some point have to be accountable for that and report back and say, this is how your money was used, and was it used for a proper purpose or not? And that's going to come, and with that then comes strings and how we're going to do this, and well, that doesn't really fit. And I literally had some great homeschoolers, some private school folks contact me and say, it's a bad deal. Thank you for voting no, because we want to do what we're doing. And we don't want that to contaminate that and ruin that. And, we have some awesome homeschool pods. I've met with them and support them. And they're worried about the fact that a parent or someone could get that voucher, and then now they've got their child and they enter that, and they don't have the same genuine care or thought, that the other folks in the homeschool pod might not have. They may have ulterior motives, whatever, and it kind of messes up a good thing. And so it's there were a lot of concerns with it.
I have some families I know, former students, in fact, that homeschool their kids, and I kind of differentiate homeschooling into three basic groups. One family I know, their kids have health issues, and they would be out of school a lot. And they have a tremendous support system. I mean, the young man in particular is going to have a choice of colleges. He's passed all the AP exams. But, traditional school would not have been the best place for him. But he's getting a better education than most. And then I have some that want to have like a Christian-based environment. And I get that, okay? And then you got that third group I'm not quite so crazy about, that they're doing it for either political or some sort of, I don't know, they don't trust public schools. They don't like public schools. They think they're, the devil or whatever. And they don't provide the kind of atmosphere that, or the support systems one of the things the homeschools have now that we didn't have back in the 90s, the internet, obviously, but they have tremendous curricula out there and all this other stuff. But that doesn't mean somebody's going to partake of it. So I'm going to homeschool my kid and, it could be throwing a video or whatever, and that's it. Or let them sit in front of a screen. Like the homeschool families I know, if they do it right, they go on field trips, they go to the museum, they do all these things. But I just don't think we got to be subsidizing, the ability of somebody to take their kid out of school just because they don't like the secular humanism or whatever they got going on. That always kills me, to tell you the truth, because I taught so many years with so many Christian teachers. It drove me crazy to have them, look at us like, some of the people in the public look at us like we're, teaching them something anti-Christian or whatever. I'm like, what are you smoking? I mean, almost all the teachers I knew were either, active Christians or at least very supportive of it, that kind of thing.
Well, go to any church and look at the Sunday school classes and see who's teaching Sunday school.
Yeah, I do. I teach Sunday school.
My Sunday school teacher is a teacher, and her substitute is a teacher.
Yeah.
And, anyways, and so I'm with you there. I think we should protect and preserve their rights to make those decisions, and I'm for that. And when it comes to school choice, I think it ought to be easy for parents to choose the path for their kid, whether that's public, private, homeschool, whatever it is. I think even in the public system, I think if you want to go from one district to another, I think it ought to be easy. I don't think it ought to cost you. I think if you want to go from one school to another within a district and you're willing to transport your kiddo, I think that ought to be easy. I don't think it ought to cost you extra. And so I'm a huge supporter of a parent's right, parent empowerment of actual school choice of, making those decisions for parents.
Well, we have school choice in Burleson.
Yeah.
You have schools of choice. And so, there's space limitations.
Yeah.
But still, if you want to put your kid in one of the elementaries that focuses on this, even if it's a crosstown drive, it's worth it. And that's another thing about the private school vouchers is that, let's say you have a kid at, O.D. Wyatt that may want to go to private school. You're going to have a difficult time getting to Over the Country Day or whatever, because you don't have any private schools that are high dollar. Most of your high dollar, high reputation private schools are in the wealthier parts of town. Second of all, there's another thing that just occurred to me is that, recruiting of students to private school is common, and it's okay. It's part of it. But what are you recruiting them for? Are you going to go to the best ball player in ODY and try to get him to come to your school because he's a great ball player? And now they get $10,000 to help you with that. I don't want to see a drain of talent, not just athletically, but all types of talent being drained out of the public schools and maybe sent into situations where it doesn't benefit the student as much as it does the school. So,
yeah. And you kind of touched on it. Let's be honest, there are issues with public school, with public education, and a lot of those are brought on are forced upon the school districts by the state.
Absolutely.
And by the United States Department of Education, frankly.
And that's true there too.
Because of the strings that are attached to every single dollar that comes from the federal government that goes to our schools and from the state even. It just creates that, in my opinion, a lot of that is what's messed things up to the point where when we think about teaching and the way I was raised, the way you were taught when you were going to school, it's not the way it is anymore. Yep. It's because of all the strings and everything else. And there's no question we have some issues. There are parts of the state that have, quote, woke agendas and things like that.
Austin and Houston come to mind.
Sure. Yeah. But that's where we can't ignore those. Let's fix them. Let's address those. I mean, let's not, if the point or the sales pitch is we're going to rescue kids from public education. Well, let's don't rescue just a few kids. Let's fix it so we're not having to rescue anyone. Let's fix the problem. That's and a lot of that lies on the responsibility of the school boards and the local elected folks there to participate in that process. And we don't need to take that away, that responsibility even away from them at the state level. But if they're actual, and there are, but when there's problems with public education and school districts, let's fix those. What is it? Whatever that takes, let's do that. And I don't believe in just throwing money at it either. That is a part of it, I'm sure. But let's fix the schools, because that's where the lion's share regardless of our kiddos are going to be educated. And we've got to make sure we're doing the best job we can.
That's one of the ironies of this whole voucher debate is some of the problems that people see in the public schools are caused by the state itself. When I started teaching back in the late 80s and then went to the high school in 1990, the state was in the background, but it wasn't nearly as predominant as it is now. And also the federal government, they have done so much damage to the public schools. And, back when Obama was president, and certainly with Biden, when they come in with all these rules about Title IX or, gender choice of bathrooms, that kind of thing, which, I'm not unsympathetic to the transgender, but I am saying there has to be a line drawn somewhere. And there you are. Also, the discipline issues, by basing them on a racial quota and that kind of thing, is what practically they did. It basically took discipline out of the schools. And so on and on and on. And then at the state level, all these requirements about not just the standardized testing, but all this other business that is related to it, and the expense and all this. A lot of the problems are caused by government. And then people look at it and say, they look at the private school or public school. Well, let me say this again. You look at the private school as an alternative because they can avoid all of this. And I don't know if they'll be able to avoid it much longer at the private school level, to tell you the truth. Because anytime the government gets involved and they get the bit between their teeth about these kind of things, they're not going to slow down.
No,
so
rarely makes it better.
No, yeah, it really does. Jeff B. says your opposition is trying to ruin my nightly appointment with Jeopardy. Shout out to the inventors of the mute button. Guarantee you, we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. I guarantee you, I'm wearing my thumb out trying to get to another channel. But as far as one last thing about the voucher thing. What are the odds of it passing in the next session?
That all depends on this election, and heavily on this election right here in this district.
Yes,
and then a few others around the state,
like Dade Phelan down in Beaumont. I've read about his.
Yep, We've got Gary Van Dever out in East Texas, John Kemple down in the Seguin area. There's a few other guys that stood up and took that vote and removed the voucher plan from that bill, and they're all being targeted.
And some didn't make it past March 4th, rather.
That's right. 6 of them didn't.
Right. One of your colleagues in Weatherford, I believe.
Yep, that's sure enough. Glenn Rogers didn't make it.
And he had something to say about it when I read in the paper.
Yeah, that's right. He still does. Yeah.
Yes, well, it's true. And that's kind of segueing into this campaign. And that has me really bothered. I've never seen a campaign that is so dependent upon, first of all, outside money and dependent on impersonal campaigning. I'm not trying to knock Miss Kerwin because I never met her, and that's one reason I am kind of knocking her. I don't know of any public appearances she's made. Maybe she's made a couple, but she sure didn't publicize them, and she sure isn't putting them on the air as far as advertisements like, hey, I'm Helen Kerwin, and this is what I stand for. I've seen nothing like that. I don't know what she sounds like. I have not heard her voice in any commercial that she's done. Said, I'm Helen Kerwin, this is what I want. It's all about liberal Dwayne Burns and how he worked with the Democrats and, he wants to take away your children and eat your pudding. I'm offended by it, to tell you the truth. I'm not that stupid. And I get tired of being told something I know is demonstrably true. So why don't you tell us some of the things that are being said about you that are totally and completely false?
Okay. I'll start by this and just say, it's all of it. All of it is untrue, but we can go through the specifics. And I think the way they did this, these outside groups have done extensive polling. They've learned and they know what the hot button issues are that poke people, that move people, that make them angry or fear. And they know that the best way to motivate folks is through fear or anger. And so they're trying to make people angry at me or fear me. And literally just making up stuff. That one of the things that they say is that I voted to raise property taxes. Yes. Not true. Voted for the largest property tax cut in history.
That's what I was thinking. One in particular. I know that's not true.
I have worked overtime on that. We have. I'm a proponent, and this is controversial a little bit, but I'm a proponent of eliminating all or at least a portion of it, but all of property taxes if possible. And I'm for looking into that and doing it. And I even, I carried a constitutional amendment that said we will no longer issue state unfunded mandates on local governments, because what does that do? Raises your property taxes. When we send a job to the local government and they can't afford to do it, they have to raise property taxes to do that. That's just a backdoor property tax increase. So I have dedicated a lot of my time down there to trying to address the property tax issue and doing nothing but lowering them. So when it's put out there that I've raised property taxes, I've voted to raise property taxes, that's blatantly false. And
I would vote for that amendment, I guarantee you, because as any board members told you, and I've talked to them too, that drives them nuts. They're like 40% of the budget's off limits because they're told how to spend it. Yep. And sometimes it's a good thing, like special ed funding or whatever, but a lot of it's just other state initiatives, and go find the money. And it really does hammer the local governments. Same thing with the city. What about this business? You voted 350 times against school vouchers. I mean, I didn't know it comes up for a vote that much.
I think their actual deal, and maybe that's what they're saying. I've read the ones that I've received, the mailers I get. They say I voted. First, they started with 300. They voted over 300 times with liberals. Voted over 350 times with the liberals. Well, it's probably more like 10,000, and it's because of this. Every other week or so, every week, it depends on when we are in session, we have what we call the local and consent calendar. And those are bills that affect just small, usually areas of one part of one person's district. And they don't involve any other part of the state. In fact, we always have some. We had, specifically, I can think of one that dealt with a water utility issue in Glen Rose. And I mean, we address those, and those all go through. They're all filed. They all go to local consent. They go through the committee process. They're vetted and everything, but they go through the local and consent calendar once the committees and everyone agrees, okay, this is a local issue. Nobody's going to oppose it. And those all, for the most part, go through unanimously. And so we do hundreds of those each session. We also do what we call the congratulatory memorial calendar, where we congratulate graduates or folks that accomplished something, or who knows what. And there's hundreds of those, thousands of those, and we vote unanimously on those for the most part. And if you take all those and you add those up over my time in the legislature, I'm sure there's thousands of those times when we've all voted unanimously or voted with everybody but one or two people for things like that. And so that's what I think of, and there are a lot of bills that go through the legislature that are close to unanimous, or that many Democrats join with Republicans because we outnumber them, and so they just join with us, because they're beat on the issue or whatever it is. There's certain issues and certain bills that fall on a party line, but we're not like Congress. It doesn't work it doesn't work like Congress does. We have many times the Democrats just vote with us because, they can't stop the bill. It doesn't matter to them, and it goes on through. So it's just a misnomer to say I voted with the liberals. It's more like they voted with me. They voted with the House Republicans. So it's, again, one of those things to try to scare people or make people angry.
What's interesting also is that one of the ads are criticizing you for supporting having the minority party in chairmanships. Or positions of chair. I won't be politically correct. That's been a Texas tradition. I mean, when the Republicans were in the minority party for all those years, they had Republican chairs in certain committees, and that's just always been that way. It's un-Texan, in fact, for have a strictly partisan choice on the chairs. This is the problem you get with the U.S. Congress, is that totally dysfunctional group of howler monkeys up there is so driven by partisanship they can't get anything done. One of the things about the Texas legislature is the partisanship and the division between the two parties was never that stark that y'all couldn't work with each other. And a lot of the major improvements that we've done were on a bipartisan basis. And now bipartisan to some people is the same thing as, commie or whatever, That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's a misnomer too. It's also it's a lie the way it's presented. They say that I voted to allow Democrat chairs. That's not true. The only person that says, and I'll talk to your point as well though, but there's one person that sets the chairs, and that's the speaker, and it is against the law. It's against ethics. It's a violation of the ethics laws too, for him to discuss who's going to be a chairman before session starts, before the the vote is taken to elect him as speaker. And once he's elected speaker, the speaker doesn't consult with everybody and ask, and bring us into the room. We all pick the chairs. No, he does that alone. Now, he interviews every single person that wants to be talked to, gets their opinion. Once the speaker is elected, he'll bring every member in individually, one at a time, and say, what are your interests? What are your, where's your expertise? All that kind of stuff. But he makes no promises about where you're going to be. I don't find out what committees I'm going to be on, or even if I'm going to chair a committee, until I get them handed to me on the House floor along with every other member of the House. So to say I voted for that is a lie. Now, people ask then, well, why did you support Dade Phelan? Well, here's the reason. We have a rule in the House Republican Caucus, and for those that don't know, the House Republican Caucus is made up of every House Republican. All right, so there's 85 of us. And we have a rule that says we will all support the person that we nominate and decide upon in the House Republican Caucus meetings before session starts. The reason we do that is because a few years ago, there was talk of like a dozen or so Republicans joining up with the 65 Democrats or so, and then they were going to elect a Democrat speaker.
Boy,
so,
that'd have been interesting.
Yeah, so we adopted that rule. The Republican Party of Texas adopted that as part of the platform and said the Republican caucus will support the person that comes out as the nominee of that caucus meeting before session. And Dade Phelan was that nominee, and I voted for him. And if Dade Phelan were sitting right here beside me right now, I would tell him, I will support whoever comes out of the next caucus meeting right before session starts, because we can't, in my opinion, we can't afford to have a Democrat chair when the Republicans are in charge. So whoever that is, that's who I will support. That's who I'm sworn to support. That's who the caucus should support and will support. And in last session, and even in this last vote, Dade Phelan got every vote but 3. And so so that's how Dade got into the position he was in. And then he sets the chairs, not me or anybody else. He does that alone. So it's just another button that they're trying to push to put blame on me and make people angry with me.
Well, and I don't know if a lot of people are aware of that process. I do know that there's always been controversy within the Republican caucus. I remember Joe Strauss got a lot of hair pulling and carrying on and that kind of thing, and old Phelan is as well. I think the last Republican House Speaker that didn't get a lot of that was Craddock, because he's, of course, now he's making plenty of money as a lobbyist, so what is he cared about? But the point is that the Texas House and Senate were not always this sharply divided, and they weren't always this far to the right. Certainly in the Senate, my goodness, Patrick has those guys in line, and it's not good for Texas. We don't want the national politics that we see on the news with all the stupidity going on up there. We don't want that in Austin. Because what a lot of people don't realize, I don't think, whereas Washington may be more noticeable or entertaining, it's you guys and the local governments that impact our lives much more closely, tax-wise and policy-wise and law and order and you name it. And it just, we don't want that in our Texas government.
Well, there's a functional role in this too that maybe we should put out there, and somebody asking, well, why would Dade Phelan put Democrats? Other than if he didn't, it would be a vast change in tradition.
I don't think it's ever happened where one party held all the seats.
But the bottom line is this: it takes 100 votes for us to do a lot of things, and we don't have 100 Republicans. And if we want to get certain things passed, any constitutional amendment, 100 votes, any third reading amendment on any bill, 100 votes. And so if we're going to do those things, we have to have 100 folks. And if the speaker were just to say, you guys are not at the table, you get no chairs, nothing, then we would see every vote just be a party line vote and we'd be stuck like Congress. And now here's the deal. He doesn't put the Democrats in charge of Ways and Means or appropriations or calendars. They're in charge of other committees. I don't want to rank them, but they don't handle the same issues, the tax issues, the border, those kind of issues. But they're also not the crazy ones either.
We're not the prominent ones. Not all committees are the same.
And every committee, all of those committees then also have Republican majorities on them for checks and balances. And so you've got a committee. It's a kind of a lower level committee, and it's going to still have a Republican majority, and it's probably going to be a Democrat that's kind of a throwback to the old school type.
Right.
Like Tracy King was a chairman, and nobody talks about it, but the Senate has Democrat chairs as well. Governor Patrick has Democrat chairs in the Senate as well. So
that's interesting. I honestly, I did not know that.
Yeah.
But
in fact, the current mayor of Houston, John Whitmire, was a chair.
Right. And I remember he was like the Democrat the Republicans respected and that kind of thing, because he'd been there so long, and he was not much of a kook or whatever, that kind of thing. But see, Whitmire was like what senators used to be, and for both parties, a little bit above all this junk. And as far as the House members, I mean, you got all the grunt work, you got to do constituent work, and you got to, you get the phone calls and, all this other stuff. And we don't need people down there that are going to be more loyal to Dan Patrick or to outside money than we are to their own constituents. And that's another thing, kind of go into it, is that, the Republicans always are screaming about George Soros or, out of state money. Who's doing the majority funding for a lot of these campaigns?
Out of state.
Out of state.
It's out of state.
Out of state.
It's out of Virginia, out of Pennsylvania. And those folks don't vote for me. I don't represent them. I don't represent the governor. I don't represent the lieutenant governor. I represent, and I don't represent any of those groups either. I represent the people in Johnson and Somerville County. And when I make votes, I try to put myself in the shoes of everyone else that I have grown up around and been around my whole life, and really try to do my dead level best to use that judgment and how is this going to affect the people that I represent and I live among, and then apply the Constitution and my own biblical faith, my faith, and different things that matter. But that's what it's about. It's not representing anybody else, but that money, it's coming from a guy named. Most of it is coming from a guy named Jeff Yass. He is one of the richest men in the world. He's the richest man in Pennsylvania. Made billions of dollars on investments in Chinese companies, namely TikTok is the big one, and owns a 7% share in it. And he has given tens of millions of dollars to groups that are working directly against me and spending an unheard of amount that it's unheard of the amount of money that they are spending against me. And, it's all public because it's all reported. But, there was a $1 million media buy. That's why you're seeing all these commercials and they're interrupting your Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy is
sports.
They spent $1 million. And the Mavs game, whatever it is, man. It's the Stars, the Rangers. It's $1 million of against me. And then same with the mail that you're getting every day that has me with a Pinocchio nose or my hair on fire or who knows what it is.
Yeah, I like that. Don't get burned again. I got one. Finally got one for, the other day, but I promise I probably get about 10 a week or more. And I just put them in the recycle bin. I get my mail at the post office. And this is what really bothers me about Miss Kerwin. I don't know her personally, and she may be a nice person for all I know, but I don't know, right? I don't ever get to talk to her. If people say, well, you got to have her on the show. Who do I call? Tim Dunn? Who am I going to call? This guy in Pennsylvania? Because she's not going to show up. And as far as any commercial I've seen, I've not seen one vote for me because I would stand for this. I've never heard that woman's voice. And I vote because I want this and I want that. Even if I don't want this and that, I want to hear her say it, as opposed to seeing your hair on fire and and how liberal Dwayne Burns is going to throw your kids to Moloch, the god, or whatever, sacrifice them, and it's like, it's just, I don't know what you mean, Mr. B, about Mr. Burns buried the lead, but there you go. But anyway, it drives me nuts that some guy in Pennsylvania thinks he wants to do for my state what he wants. It's not his friggin' business what goes on in this state about our education system. All right, and as far as Mr. Dunn out in West Texas, who's spending a couple $1 billion, he's worth that much. If he wants to impose that on the rest of the state, I'm opposed to that. But he's got a very strict conservative view about schools and the role of faith in the public life and all that.
Well, he owns private schools too.
Right.
Just
right.
like Jeff Yass.
Yeah. And
Don't forget that.
Yeah. And I fine, also don't divide us, the people of faith, because you got people on both sides of the aisle here of faith, and this is very divisive amongst the Christian community as well. And so that's what I'm really where the money was coming from. Okay, that's what he meant. Okay. Now, as far as your own fundraising, I'm sure you get some donations, but nothing even remotely like this.
No, I can't compete. You won't see my I won't have commercials on TV, unfortunately. But what I'm depending on is word of mouth. And I've been out there meeting and greeting people every single day. Events that have a couple of folks there, a few folks there, or hundreds of folks there, it doesn't matter. Every single vote matters. Every single constituent matters. Every opinion matters. And there are things that we don't agree on. A lot of, nobody's going to agree with you except the person in the mirror all the time.
You got to live with yourself, don't you?
Iffy, too. But,
and you got to live with Mrs. Burns too, right?
That's exactly right. And so I that's what we're relying on is the impact of hopefully my service and I believe this is a ministry that I'm involved with as well, and hopefully there's an impact there that folks can see through all of these lies, that at least folks that know me, and then we're trying to get out there and reach the folks that don't, and set them straight.
Well, you were at the Railroaders Friday night, weren't you?
I was.
Yeah. The first pitch, and I saw a clip of that, and I saw Summer Garcia Peterson's first pitch. Sorry, Summer. Need to practice a little bit more.
Next step.
Yeah. Matt Cobb, he's a plumber here in town, and old-time Burleson family. Met Mr. Burns at City on a Hill. Yes, you were there. I was there, too, but I didn't see you there. The slanderous campaign against him is obvious to me, and a lot of people I've spoken to. I think he'll get the votes he needs. Thank you, Matt, because I was going to segue to that. You'd be surprised. I don't know if this is an endorsement or not, or for confirmation for some people, but I have people that are crossing the aisle to vote for you. They did in the primary, and they're going to do so again. They normally vote Democrat, but they're going to vote for you because they know what this threat presents to the schools and everybody else. I know a handful of people that are going to vote. Really, they don't vote very often at all. I mean, you have to drag them to the presidential votes. That's how reluctant they. But they're going to vote this time.
Well, I think people are irritated by it. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think folks are irritated by it. And folks do there is the issue, the voucher issue. And let's not make no mistake about it. This is about one thing.
It is.
It is about the fact that I voted against the governor's voucher plan. And he literally showed me polling when I told him I was opposed to it that said, we can recruit a candidate, and if I endorse him, we can beat you. And I said, well, I don't believe your polling. And I'm still going to do what I believe is right. And so the bottom line is what you were just saying is that, the greater threat or the greater thing. And the reason I think that some folks are stepping up that normally wouldn't vote for, in a Republican primary, perhaps, is because they want to show that this seat belongs to us and it's not going to be bought. The seat isn't there to represent what the governor wants. The seat is there to represent what the folks in this district want. And again, they may not agree with me on every issue, but they agree with that.
That's true.
I think that's a big deal. But and then beyond that is actually, like you said, folks that oppose the voucher plan for various reasons. And it's brought people together in weird ways, because the plan was so bad that, you've got conservatives, ultra conservatives, moderates, all over that are opposed to that plan.
And I think also the constant inundation with these ads that really are not believable. No one really believes you voted 350 times against vouchers or whatever. No one believes that junk. Most people that have any sense of what goes on in the government knows that you didn't put Democrat chairs on there, knows that, that you're no liberal. And so I think they're offended by being told this all the time. And so I've talked to several people that are going to make a point to vote for you. Now, are you going to win? God help you. I hope you do. I think the Texas people, particularly in this district, realize out-of-state money is funding this woman and this whole movement. They should be angry about that. I mean, Mr. Yass has no business getting involved in our schools here, in our county, in our state. And so, but they're trying to produce some sort of culture that a lot of us, even as Christians, would be very uncomfortable with. And that's what really gets to me but I just want you to know, a lot of people told me that they have your complete and total endorsement for you. That's what they wanted me to tell you. Complete and total endorsement. Yeah. Complete and total endorsement.
Those are the endorsements that matter.
Yeah.
Honestly, the endorsements that matter to me. The endorsements of folks that live right here.
Are you going to stay involved in politics if things don't work out? Because we have to acknowledge that's a possibility.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do acknowledge that. And so here's the, I don't know. I'm certainly not just going to go home and pout. And here's how I explain it to folks. So God, and not to get all faithy on folks again, but it's
That's
a part
fine.
of who I am, man.
That's it.
I can't hide from it. Is that I do believe that God has prepared me to do this job. I do through experiences, my life experiences, education, just relationships, things like that. And all of that culminates in, I believe, God preparing me to do this job now. And he's lit the path to here. Now, here's the great thing about it is I don't know how far that's lit. I don't know if I'm going to win or lose either. I'm going to do my dead level best because I believe that's the charge that God's given me to do my best and put my best foot forward in his name. But at the bottom line is, I don't know where the path goes, but I can guarantee this: the light won't go out. So there will be a light that goes in a direction. And if it continues down this path, I'll do it. And if it doesn't, for some reason, I'll go where that path goes. But I'm going to look for the light because it'll be there, and I'll hold my head high, and I will have a smile and try to treat people with kindness and do whatever that is. And if it involves politics, that'll be awesome. But there will be a door. There will be a door.
What it interests me is that you have a set of standards that haven't changed since you got into office. And you said, here they are, like it or not, criticize me or praise me, whatever. I can't say that about our governor because when he became governor 10 years ago, I voted for him because I didn't like Wendy Davis. And I thought he was a fairly old school Republican. Now I don't recognize him. I don't recognize this hard right governor. And I need to make a public apology to a couple of my peers back in the day because I vouched for him. A couple of my Democrat friends were in tears and he won. And I said, don't worry about it. He's not going to be harmful to us at all. I was wrong, Paula Peckham. I don't know if you're hearing this or not, but you were right. I was wrong because he has turned into something I don't recognize. Is this, hard right, whatever you want me to say, for sale kind of guy. Second of all, I'm really surprised your opponent is with her background as a mayor of Glen Rose. She's in support of vouchers because she has to know, as a mayor of a smaller town, what that would do to Glen Rose ISD. She'd have to know what impact it would have on her community, which is a growing community, and a lot of people like to live there. It's a very nice town. And yet she still supports it. I feel like she sold out a lot of people for Mr. Yass's money or whomever else. And if she wants to dispute that, I'd like to hear it. You'd like to hear her own voice. I like for her to campaign as opposed to having all this money campaign for her. This is what I want, is from a candidate to come and speak face-to-face to the voters. Speaking of which, do you have any events coming up?
Yeah, and we had an event this morning at our place, and then we've got, you've asked me a great question because we've got one just about every single day. That's leading up. We've got one at Massey's in Alvarado.
I've heard really good things about that place.
Yeah, it's great. We had an event last week at Massey's in Glen Rose, as a matter of fact.
And
it's a great place. Like you said, we had the Railroaders event on Friday. We've got. Oh goodness, I'd have to look at my calendar, Brad. But we've got. You want to catch me? There are opportunities. We have virtually every single day coming up. There are either events that someone's hosting because they want me to get to know their neighbors, or it's a public event or whatever. They're not all of them are public, because it's folks that have invited friends to their home or something like that, similar to that. But we try to put that out there on social media or our email and folks, and let folks know where we're going to be so they can ask questions and if they've got questions, holler at me. I'm happy to visit.
Well, there's a lot of events coming up. I know the farmers market is also very well attended. Now, a lot of the attendees are not in your district, but there are a lot of them are, and they're not just from Burleson. I mean, that's I don't know how Chas Forster operates it, but I know candidates have used that as a place to meet and greet. There's probably, I know that he prefers to have like you have a spot as opposed to just wander through the crowd.
Around.
Yeah. That kind of thing. So you might want to talk to him. I'm just throwing him out there under the bus. Who knows? But there's other events going on. I'm trying to remember. Well, a couple of them are after the election, come to think of it. So I don't know if that's going to be helpful. But there are a big deal coming up, as you probably know, on Memorial Day, the Honey Tour.
Yep.
Burleson Chamber. And they have that carnival going on over at Chisenhall Park now. Mm-hmm. That was really successful.
Yeah.
And that'd be a good place to spend some time schmoozing and handing out brochures and say, it's not true. It's not true.
Well, there's an event Saturday. There's in Alvarado that's got, it's going to benefit the victims of human trafficking. And it's going to go on all day. It's near Massey's over there in Alvarado.
Looking at my calendar, see if there's anything else.
There's all kinds of things. And I try to go to as many as I can and always have. That's always been one of the fun parts and one of the challenging parts of the job is to be everywhere I can be for folks. And it's funny. I was criticized a little bit because people were like, "Well, you haven't been around this year," and I have to admit, you're correct. And the reason is because we were in session from January to June, and then we had 4 special called sessions, and the last one ended on December the 5th.
Right.
And so they are correct. I was doing the job that I've been entrusted to do, and for most of the year, and so because I had folks, well, why didn't you come back and tell us? Why didn't you come back and tell us about this or that or this? Well, the voucher bill didn't come to fruition, and the votes weren't taken until December, till the end of the deal there, and so. It's hard to get back and tell everybody about everything that was going on. But we do our social media and email and try to reach as many people as we can through that when we're in Austin. But
here you have your website, burnsfortexas.com. On the mailer, you have a QR code. The early voting is at May 20th through 24th, which is much more important than it used to be. I teach in my class that the majority of votes are cast before Election Day. Mm-hmm. And it's changed the nature of campaigning quite a bit, but there you go. The day itself, May 28th, and it's at the sub-courthouse here in town, and at least that's where the Burleson votes. I'm sure they other locations.
That'll be the early vote. It will be at the sub-courthouse. That's correct.
I think the 28th also, Burleson does it at the sub-courthouse, or at least Burleson does. I don't know if they do it at the precinct level, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, and it'll be strange because the precincts, they're not, I don't believe that there's like 26, that they usually open up for voting locations. I don't believe all of those are going to be open because there's only one race on the ballot that day.
Right.
And so I think from what I recall, like half of them are going to be closed. So there could be some confusion, unfortunately, on election day itself. Yeah. So the easiest thing for folks to do is do it early. You can go to the sub-courthouse all week, the 20th through the 24th, and get that done. And that way you don't have to worry about coming in after Memorial Day, a long weekend, and trying to get things done when you're behind at work or who knows what.
Yeah, that is an issue I hadn't thought about because I've been voting early lately. I prefer to vote on the day of, but it accommodates my wife and her schedule, so we'll go vote early, and it's easy and quick. And so, guys, you know what's at stake, vast listening audience. I'm looking somewhere at the cameras. You know what's at stake. We can't allow outside forces take over our state, and we can't and whatnot. No, boy. Mr. Burns, what was your stance on the right to farm bill? We're running close on time, but please... Please answer
Sure. So I was the author of that bill, and so I was for it. And for those that don't know, it was a bill that protected private property rights. It basically said you can't stop folks from farming and ranching in any part of the state for some arbitrary reason, because we had cities that were passing ordinances that were designed to run people out of business that had been farming, and now they found themselves in more populated areas. So they were passing ordinances that literally said things like, you can't store hay bales in a field for more than 48 hours, or you'll face fines. Things like that. Literally, I held the violations in my hand. I saw them. So we passed a bill that said cities can't do that, counties can't do that, agencies can't do that unless there's a actual imminent threat to public health. It became a constitutional amendment. It was on the ballot in November, Proposition 1, and that was passed by over 80% of the Texans. that voted across the state. And I'm proud to say now we have enshrined that protection into the Constitution of the state.
So my garden is safe, huh?
Your literally, yeah, you bet.
Well, my garden ain't doing so well, so I don't know if I'm a threat to anybody. But Mr. Land says he appreciates your work on that, and Jeff B. is very complimentary of how you conducted this whole interview without getting into personality conflicts and whatever else. I know sometimes anybody would be tempted, but I appreciate that. This is the kind of campaigning I like to see. None of this hair on fire standing next to Nancy Pelosi routine. So, guys, we know what to do. Share this with your friends. We're going to have a couple of reels made from this interview and coming out in the next few days. So hopefully reemphasize this. Check out what you can do because we need to keep Texas for Texans, not for Mr. Yass or whomever else wants to get involved. Leah Bridges Wright, praying for you and definitely voting for you. Good luck, DeWayne. Do you know Leah Bridges Wright?
Yes.
Okay.
And thank you. And thank you for the prayers. Honestly, talk about what my family needs more than anything, and that is prayers. And so I'm sincerely grateful for that. Thank you.
Well, see what is today, the 14th. So we're coming up pretty close. Yep. You know, it's going to start next week.
Yep.
So we hope it works out. You have my prayers as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. We'll
Always.
On Thursday, I have a couple of members from the Fine Arts Department of BISD. Next week, it's mostly for charity work. We got some of our nonprofits will be on because they need help. And it's a lot of it. So thank you for watching. Share this with all your friends. Goodbye-bye.